When unemployment checks started arriving in Amy Anderson's mailbox, she figured it had to be a glitch. She hadn't applied for benefits.
I'm like, what is this? Unemployment office, And then
but the checks just kept coming.
Like 1 or 2 a week, okay, I get it. But they're coming in almost every day, at least 2 or 3 at a time.
Over the past month, the Portland woman says she's received dozens and dozens of envelopes from the state employment department. Each letter lists her home address, but somebody else's name.
So there was checks in their name, there was mail in their name, and then there was these credit card, debit cards coming up in their name.
A public records request found Oregon's employment department has seen a growing number of ID theft cases in the past year, including a record 2,100 cases opened in November alone.
See all that in your mailbox. Yeah, that was definitely a head scratcher.
James Moriarty found his mailbox full of 30 unemployment checks made out to his father-in-law, who never filed for unemployment in Oregon.
He lived, worked, and retired in California.
His father-in-law passed away in 2019, yet the state of Oregon just sent him unemployment checks totaling $12,000, which Moriarty is trying to return.
I just don't understand how someone could miss it at the employment office.
The employment department wouldn't comment on specific cases, but Director David Gerstenfeld admits unemployment insurance has become a target for fraudsters during the pandemic.
Some overpayments have happened and some fraudulent payments have gone out.
The agency has intentionally revealed little about its investigations to avoid tipping off the bad guys. The FBI has suggested this fraud often involves criminals using stolen identities to submit fraudulent unemployment insurance claims online.
We've seen, and other states have seen, some large, sophisticated criminal rings attempting to defraud trust funds as well.
Victims of identity theft often have no idea they've been targeted by cyber criminals who've often bought or stolen their personal data online. KGW used the names on these letters to locate several victims across the state. One man learned his identity had been compromised after being notified by his employer that an unemployment claim had been filed. Payroll flagged the claim as fraudulent and notified the state in late October. He also tried to call the agency repeatedly to warn the claim was bogus. Yet unemployment checks were still sent out in his name. Those checks arrived in Amy Anderson's mailbox in November and December. The state declined to explain how or why this happened. Which leads us to another big unanswered question. Why are all these checks being sent to a stranger?
I cannot even begin to guess. I mean, I like detective work, but this one's got me puzzled.
So it's definitely a widespread problem.
Parker Crook of the cybersecurity firm Recorded Future says similar schemes have been uncovered in places like California and Washington. Crooks often use false addresses in hopes of stealing the checks.
Some of these crews will actually set up shop and bounce from state to state for a short time, renting out something like an Airbnb while they try to intercept some of the letters associated with unemployment fraud claims in the mail.
Whatever the scheme, Amy Anderson explains the criminals didn't get anything from her mailbox. It's secure. And she did the right thing by sending the unopened envelopes back to the state of Oregon.
Okay, Kyle Aboshi joining us now. What an interesting story. For the sake of people at home, what should they do if they start getting unemployment checks sent to their house for strangers?
Well, most important, report it. You can call the employment department or file a complaint online. Now, several people have said they've been frustrated by the long wait times on the phone. The agency says they know that's a big issue, but also don't open the letters. Mark them fraud or fraudulent. Also return to sender and then send them back to the employment department.
Now, we've been discussing the potential and the reality of fraud when it came to this from the very beginning. I mean, Washington had a big issue with a Nigerian crime ring that ended up stealing a bunch of money. Is there any indication that this may be connected to that or something like that?
We don't know for sure, and we also don't know the scale of this particular fraud. The state isn't releasing data on losses, fearing it may inspire, help other criminals. They suggested, though, the losses are not quite as significant as we've seen in other states, Washington one being one specific example. You know, part of the reason fraudsters pounced on the state is the state is working so quickly to get money out. It's paid more than $6 billion in benefits since March. So you can understand why it's potentially very ripe for this type of fraud.
What's the state doing to kind of seal up any gaps, to put some new safeguards in place, stuff like that?
another great question. And we asked the state that very question. What type of safeguards, what type of precautions are you taking? They wouldn't answer for security reasons. Several states have implemented a second step, new procedures to help crack down on fraud. Also, the Labor Department put in some new guidelines, also handed out money to states to help combat this fraud, which really is occurring nationwide.
Yeah. All right, Kyle Aboshi. Thanks, sir.